Welcome to Deep Dive Podcast, episode number 9. Okay, let's unpack a truly fascinating topic today. We're going to take a deep dive into something humanity has, well, done for millennia, yet it's enjoying this huge resurgence in modern health circles. I'm talking about the 24-hour fast. It's an intriguing paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
An ancient practice deeply rooted in history, now suddenly viewed as some kind of novel health trend.
It really is. And the sources we looked at, they paint such a rich picture.
Right. So our mission for this deep dive, as always, is to really extract the most important nuggets of knowledge from the sources you've shared. We're looking at everything from its ancient roots to the intricate science of what actually happens in your body.
And the health aspects, of course.
Exactly. The crucial health benefits, and importantly, the potential risks, too. Prepare for some aha moments, maybe some surprising facts, as we journey through the history, the biology, and, the complex science of going without food for a full 24 hours.
Yeah. And what's truly fascinating here, I think, is how something as fundamental as just not eating has such this rich, evolving narrative, from spiritual observance way back when to modern therapeutic inquiry today. Today, we're really going to try and dissect how this temporary absence of food activates these pretty profound adaptive responses in the human system, understanding not just what happens, but crucially, why it matters to you.
And just to be clear, we're focusing specifically on a complete 24-hour fast, right?
For all purposes today, a 24-hour fast means, well, basically no food. But calorie-free beverages like water, plain tea, black coffee, those are generally permitted. Actually, they're encouraged for hydration.
Got it. So when we talk about fasting today, like you said, it often feels brand new. You see it all over social media, health magazines. But what's truly compelling, and what the sources really drive home, is that fasting is, well, it's as old as humanity itself. It's a practice deeply ingrained in so many diverse cultures and traditions for millennia. This isn't just some modern dietary trend. It's a really profound human engagement with things like self-discipline, purification, maybe even connecting with something, beyond the mundane.
Absolutely.
And while we are honing in on the 24-hour fast, it is worth just briefly mentioning that it falls under this big umbrella term of intermittent fasting, or AF.
Right, which includes lots of different approaches.
Yeah, like alternate day fasting, time-restricted eating, that's 16.8 is probably the most famous one, and even one meal a day, OMAD. But for this deep dive, that 24-hour window is really our central focus.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, historically, the intention behind fasting often went way beyond just, cutting calories. Think about ancient civilizations. Our sources mention it served as a preparatory rite for priests and priestesses, maybe trying to get divine insights. We see that in Hellenistic mystery religions. And pre-Columbian peoples in Peru apparently used it for penance after confessing sins. In many cultures, it was even believed to, appease angry gods or maybe help resurrect a god of vegetation.
So really fundamental beliefs tied into it.
Deeply fundamental. And beyond ritual, fasting was just crucial in spiritual quests and training. Native American tribes, for instance, practiced it during vision quests. They were seeking guidance, believing it purified the body and mind.
Makes sense.
Similarly, even shamans in Siberia would fast for deeper visions, spiritual control. And you had priestly societies among the Pueblo Indians fasting before their major seasonal ceremonies.
It's everywhere.
It is. And what's also noteworthy, I think, is its early therapeutic significance. As early as the 5th century BCE, the Greek physician Hippocrates was recommending abstinence from food or drink for certain illness symptoms.
Hippocrates himself.
Yeah. And some ancient physicians even observed what they called a fasting instinct, where patients naturally lost their appetite when they were sick.
Oh, right. I know that feeling.
Exactly. And these doctors believed that actually giving food at such times could be detrimental. They saw fasting as a natural part of the recovery process. So this historical perspective, it reveals this really fundamental understanding that, hey, periods without food could actually be beneficial for physical well-being.
It's incredible to think about, isn't it? I mean, from ancient purification rites all the way to early medical recommendations. And this practice, it's still very much alive today. It's profoundly woven into the fabric of major world religions.
Absolutely central to many.
Let's unpack this a bit. In Judaism, you have Yom Kippur, right? A 25-hour fast for atonement plus other fasts for mourning. Christians widely observe fasting during the 40-day Lent season.
And specific days.
Right. Catholics fast before communion, Ash Wednesday. Eastern Orthodox Christians have multiple extended fasting periods throughout the year, plus weekly fasts. It's quite rigorous.
It can be, yeah.
For Muslims, fasting during the month of Ramadan is, of course, one of the 5 pillars of Islam. Abstaining from dawn to sunset, the goal being to purify the soul, cultivate self-discipline. Hinduism sees diverse fasting practices, often linked to specific deities or festivals. Buddhism uses it for mindfulness, detachment, often paired with meditation.
And Jainism, too, seeking a transcendent state.
Yeah, and then interestingly, Zoroastrianism actually prohibits fasting. They view it as not strengthening you against evil, so a different take there.
Fascinating contrast.
But it's not just religious or spiritual, is it? Fasting has also been this incredibly powerful gesture for social and political views.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, you think of Mahatma Gandhi, his iconic fasts in the early 20th century, both to atone for violence and to protest British rule. Hugely impactful.
A major historical example.
And we see other examples too, right? In civil rights movements, anti-war protests, hunger strikes as a form of protest.
It's a powerful tool politically.
So what does this all mean then? When you look across all these diverse applications, spiritual, medical, social, even physiological trend, the sources seem to highlight this unifying principle.
Which is?
That fasting involves a deliberate, controlled imposition of stress or deprivation. And the intended outcome, it seems, is always some kind of adaptive response that leads to an improvement or strengthening of the system, whatever that system may be.
Right. So the natural question then is, what exactly is that adaptive response? The sources describe fasting as a kind of stress adaptogen. It forces the system to adapt and hopefully emerge stronger or more refined.
A stress adaptogen, I like that term.
Yeah, and it really goes beyond just a simple caloric restriction model. It points to a deeper, maybe evolutionary mechanism where these periodic challenges are actually crucial for maintaining and enhancing systemic robustness. It implies the benefits aren't just due to what is removed, the calories, but maybe more importantly, what is activated, these adaptive stress responses triggered by that temporary absence of food. It's like a river carving its path through time. It's constantly adapting its form, but it retains its essence as this profound human practice.
That idea of the body adapting, emerging stronger, it's incredibly compelling. So let's dive into the core of it then. What exactly is happening inside your body during a 24-hour fast?
Okay.
Our sources explain it orchestrates this really complex internal symphony of physiological and metabolic adaptations. It's not just about feeling hungry. Your body is undergoing these pretty profound transformations.
Yeah, profound is the right word. The most immediate and, fundamental change is the body's transition in how it produces energy. We call this the metabolic switch.
Okay, the metabolic switch.
Right. So normally your body primarily runs on glucose, which it gets from carbohydrates in your food. Any excess glucose gets stored as glycogen, mainly in your liver and your muscles. Think of it as readily available fuel.
Like a pantry full of snacks.
Kind of, yeah. But as a fast begins and you stop eating, your body first dips into these glycogen reserves to keep your blood glucose stable.
Makes sense. Use the easy stuff first.
Exactly. But these glycogen stores, they're finite. They don't last forever. After about, say, 18 to 24 hours of fasting, these reserves become significantly depleted.
Okay, so the pantry's getting empty.
Right. And at this critical point, your body undergoes this fundamental shift. It dramatically increases its reliance on its vast fat reserves. Stored fat gets broken down into fatty acids, and then the liver converts these fatty acids into something called ketone bodies. These are a highly efficient alternative energy source.
Ketones. We hear that word a lot with fasting and keto diets.
Precisely. And this pivotal transition from burning glucose to burning fat and producing ketones, that's the metabolic switch. And it typically takes, 12 or more hours for your blood ketone levels to rise significantly enough for this switch to really be considered flipped.
12 hours or more. So it doesn't happen instantly.
No, it takes time for those glycogen stores to run down. And what's really fascinating here is how these ketone bodies, the main ones are called acetoacetate and a beta-hydroxybutyrate. They're made in the liver, but they can just freely diffuse across cell membranes. And they are vital because they have this unique ability to cross the blood-brain barrier.
Oh, that's key for the brain, right? Because the brain uses a ton of energy.
A huge amount. And it usually relies heavily on glucose. So ketones become this indispensable alternative fuel source for the brain, especially when glucose is limited during fasting. Think of your body's energy system like a really sophisticated hybrid car.
Okay, I like analogies.
Most of the time it runs on gasoline, that's the glucose from your food. But when that glucose tank runs low, maybe after a 24-hour fast, this metabolic switch flips. Your body then seamlessly transitions to its secondary, highly efficient fuel source, the fat reserves, converting them into ketones. It's like the car switching over to its electric battery.
Providing clean, sustained power.
Exactly. Especially for the brain, even when the glucose is gone. This ability of the brain to adapt its fuel source, it's a fundamental survival mechanism. It was honed by evolution.
Because our ancestors wouldn't have had food available 24/7.
Not at all. Food scarcity was regular. If the brain couldn't adapt, cognitive function would decline, survival would be impaired. Ketones ensure sustained cognitive performance, alertness, even when glucose is scarce.
That's an amazing picture of how our body adapts. It really is like an internal engineering marvel. But how does the body know to make this switch? I mean, it sounds automatic, but there must be signals, right? It's all about the intricate dance of hormones, isn't it?
Precisely. You hit the nail on the head. The metabolic switch is intricately regulated by this complex interplay of hormones. As your blood glucose levels naturally decline during fasting, your pancreas responds. It significantly reduces insulin secretion.
Insulin goes down.
Right, because insulin's job is usually to help cells take up glucose and store energy. And conversely, the pancreas increases the release of another hormone called glucagon.
Glucagon goes up.
Exactly. Glucagon primarily targets the liver. It stimulates the breakdown of that stored glycogen we talked about, releasing glucose into the bloodstream. This is critical for maintaining blood glucose homeostasis, keeping it stable enough.
So falling insulin, rising glucagon. That's the main signal.
That's the powerful signal, yes. It directs the body away from energy storage and towards utilizing existing energy reserves, particularly kicking off fat burning. Now, it's worth noting, in shorter fasts, your peripheral insulin might not drop dramatically, but other markers like C-peptide usually indicate that overall insulin production is reduced. And interestingly, really prolonged fasting, like say 72 hours, can even lead to a temporary state of insulin resistance. But this is actually a physiological adaptation to deliberately spare glucose, making sure the brain gets priority.
Wow, the body prioritizing the brain. Makes sense.
It does. And one of the other really remarkable physiological responses to fasting is a significant increase in human growth hormone, or HGH, from the pituitary gland.
HGH. I associate that with, well, growth, obviously, and maybe muscle building.
It does play those roles, yes. But the surge during fasting appears to be independent of weight loss, suggesting it's a direct metabolic effect of the fasting state itself. And the magnitude can be quite dramatic. The sources mentioned studies reporting substantial increases, particularly in women who often start with lower baseline HGH levels.
And why does HGH go up during fasting? What's the point?
Well, HGH helps preserve muscle mass and bone density, which could be important during a period without protein intake. It also encourages the use of fat for energy. While the study cited didn't definitively link this HGH surge directly to reduced cardiovascular or metabolic risks, but the fact that HGH deficiency is known to be associated with increased risks, well, it implies some fascinating potential for maybe ameliorating these issues through fasting-induced HGH release. It's an area of ongoing research.
Interesting connection.
Definitely. And one more piece of the hormonal puzzle. During a fast, your autonomic nervous system also gets involved in mobilizing energy. It releases catecholamines. You probably know them as adrenaline, epinephrine, and norepinephrine.
Fight or flight hormones.
Exactly. They come from the adrenal glands and sympathetic neurons. And just like under stress, they increase heart rate, blood pressure, and crucially, they mobilize glucose and fatty acids, making energy readily available.
So it seems like the body is really kicking into high gear metabolically, even though you're not eating.
In a way, yes. It's shifting its entire energy strategy.
So, okay, not only is your body switching fuel sources, adjusting this whole symphony of hormones, but it's also, apparently, undergoing a deep clean at the cellular level. This is where that concept of autophagy comes in, right? It sounds kind of like cellular self-care on steroids.
That's actually an excellent way to put it, because beyond these big macroscopic metabolic shifts, fasting triggers these profound changes right down at the cellular level. And a key one is activating this vital process of cellular self-renewal called autophagy.
Autophagy, self-eating, I think I read.
Exactly. It comes from Greek words meaning self-eating. And it's essentially a fundamental cellular recycling system. It allows cells to break down and remove damaged or dysfunctional components.
Like what kind of components?
Things like misfolded proteins, worn-out organelles, mitochondria are a big one, and just general cellular debris that accumulates over time.
So cellular junk?
Pretty much. And the resulting building blocks from breaking down this junk, they get recycled to create new, healthy cellular components. This continuous house cleaning is absolutely vital for maintaining internal stability or homeostasis and for adapting to stress.
So autophagy is like your body's highly efficient internal recycling and repair crew?
Perfect analogy. And when you fast, it's like giving this crew a dedicated shift. Time to clean house, dismantle the old and damaged parts, and repurpose the materials to build new, healthier components.
It's not just tidiness then, it's rejuvenation.
Exactly. It's about rejuvenating your cells, much like a meticulous maintenance program for a high-performance machine.
Are there different kinds? The sources mentioned types.
Yes, there are 3 primary types generally described. Macroautophagy is the most studied. That's where these double membrane vesicles called autophagosomes form and engulf the targeted components. Then there's microautophagy, where the lysosome itself directly engulfs stuff. And chaperone-mediated autophagy, or CMA, which is more selective, targeting specific proteins.
Okay, but macroautophagy is the main one people talk about with fasting.
It's the one most associated with the bulk clearance, yes. This isolation membrane expands, forms the autophagosome, which then fuses with a lysosome, the cell's recycling center, breaking down the contents and recycling those building blocks. And this is especially important for cells that don't divide often, like neurons in your brain. They can't just dilute waste by dividing, so they rely heavily on autophagy to stay clean.
Wow. So the potential benefits are pretty huge then. Cellular renewal, getting rid of junk.
Absolutely. It helps maintain cellular balance, potentially lowers the risk of chronic diseases by removing dysfunctional parts. It might help clear pathogens to support the immune system.
And anti-aging, I hear that a lot.
It's often called an anti-aging process because clearing out that accumulated cellular debris could, in theory, help the body function more efficiently over time, potentially extending health span, if not lifespan.
And fasting is a key trigger for this.
Fasting is recognized as one of the most effective natural ways to trigger autophagy. It creates that mild cellular stress we talked about, which prompts the cells to activate this recycling process. Research suggests significant autophagy starts ramping up around, say, 18 hours of fasting and becomes more pronounced between 48 to 72 hours.
So a 24-hour fast definitely gets the ball rolling, even if longer fasts might induce more.
Exactly. It initiates the process.
This idea of cellular rejuvenation is just incredible. It really does sound like fasting is tuning up our entire internal operating system.
And this, I guess, leads us neatly into the concept of metabolic flexibility, doesn't it? Absolutely. All these physiological changes we've discussed during fasting and the metabolic switch, hormonal shifts, autophagy, they're all interconnected. They form this highly integrated network that ultimately enhances your systemic resilience. And metabolic flexibility is right at the heart of that resilience. It's essentially the body's ability to efficiently adapt its metabolism in response to changes in energy demand and, crucially, fuel availability.
So how well you can switch between burning carbs and burning fat.
Precisely. How seamlessly your body can switch between burning glucose when it's available and burning fat when it's not, or when energy demands change, like during exercise. This adaptability is essential for maintaining a stable internal energy balance, whether you're in a state of caloric excess or restriction.
And someone who is metabolically flexible.
A metabolically flexible individual can effectively burn glucose after eating carbs and then efficiently switch over to burning fat when glucose levels drop, like during fasting or between meals. It's really considered a hallmark of optimal metabolic health.
Okay, and what governs this flexibility? Are there master switches controlling this too?
There are. The sources point to key master regulators like AMPK, that's adenosine monophosphate activated protein kinase, and mTOR, the mechanistic target of rapamycin.
AMPK and mTOR. Okay, those sound important.
Yeah, they are. These are signaling pathways that act like central hubs, integrating signals from nutrient availability, the cell's own energy status, and stress levels. An important relationship here is that AMPK is generally a potent negative regulator of mTOR, meaning when AMPK is activated, it typically inhibits mTOR activity.
So they work in opposition, kind of.
In many ways, yes. This antagonistic relationship is crucial for cellular energy balance. AMPK activation generally signals low energy. It reduces cellular energy expenditure by inhibiting building processes, which mTOR often promotes, and instead promotes breakdown processes like autophagy and fat burning to restore cellular energy levels.
And fasting activates AMPK.
Yes, during fasting, those hormonal shifts we talked about, falling insulin, rising glucagon, influence these pathways. AMPK gets activated, which helps promote things like mitochondrial biogenesis, making new mitochondria, and autophagy. Meanwhile, mTOR, specifically a complex called mTORC1, is typically active when nutrients are plentiful, signaling growth and building. And when mTORC1 is active, it tends to suppress autophagy.
Ah, so the balance shifts during fasting.
Exactly. The delicate balance between mTORC1 and AMPK activation largely dictates the extent of autophagy induction. Fasting tips that balance towards AMPK activation and mTOR suppression, favoring cleanup and energy mobilization over growth.
Okay, so these are like the body's internal accountants, managing resources based on income or lack thereof.
A great way to think about it.
And speaking of resources, or maybe the currency they manage, what about NAD+ and sirtuins? These terms pop up a lot now in discussions about energy metabolism, anti-aging, longevity.
Right, and this brings us to how our body's fundamental chemistry really plays into this whole picture. Nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, NAD plus SEN, is this absolutely crucial coenzyme. It's central to energy metabolism redox reactions, making ATP across basically all life forms.
So fundamental to energy.
Absolutely. But beyond just raw energy production, NAD plus serves as an essential cofactor, like a necessary helper molecule for a specific class of enzymes called sirtuins.
NAD+ fuels the sirtuins.
In essence, yes. And through this role and others, NAD plus directly and indirectly influences a huge range of key cellular functions, metabolic pathways, DNA repair, how cells respond to stress, and processes related to cellular aging, all vital for maintaining tissue and metabolic health and potentially promoting healthy aging.
And NAD+ levels change as we age.
That's a really significant finding in aging research, yes. There's a gradual decline in tissue and cellular NAD plus levels as we age. And this decline seems to be causally linked to numerous aging-associated diseases.
But can we boost it?
Well, remarkably, research, often in model organisms but increasingly explored in humans, suggests that restoring NAD plus levels holds potential for slowing down, maybe even reversing some of these age-related declines and diseases.
Okay, so NAD+ is the currency. What about the sirtuins, the accountants?
Right. Sirtuins, like SIRT1 and SIRT3, which are often studied, are a family of highly conserved proteins. They act as cellular energy sensors. They get activated by conditions of nutrient deficiency, like fasting, which conveniently also tends to lead to increased NAD plus levels, or at least an improved NAD plus NADH ratio, which favors sirtuin activity.
So fasting boosts NAD+ availability and activates sirtuins.
It seems to create the conditions for that, yes.
Okay.
And this sirtuin activation plays a critical role in metabolic regulation stress response. They've even been implicated in having anti-cancer effects in some contexts.
How so?
Well, for example, SIRT3, which is primarily in the mitochondria, enhances fatty acid oxidation, burning fat efficiently, and helps suppress reactive oxygen species, those damaging free radicals. This links dietary restriction, like fasting, with beneficial metabolic adaptations and increased stress resistance at the cellular level.
So let's use your analogy again. NAD+ is the vital currency of cellular energy and repair.
Right.
And sirtuins are the diligent accountants who manage this currency.
Exactly. During fasting, it's like the cellular economy shifts into this lean mode. This increases the value and the efficient use of NAD plus lebs, and this in turn activates the sirtuin accountants to meticulously manage resources, ensuring efficient energy production, DNA repair, cellular maintenance.
Ultimately contributing to a more resilient and potentially longer-lived cellular enterprise.
Precisely. That's the idea. This intricate interplay really suggests that fasting doesn't just offer a collection of separate individual benefits. It seems to orchestrate this profound systemic reprogramming of the body's entire internal operating system.
Enhancing resilience, efficiency.
Yeah, overall cellular resilience, energy efficiency, and potentially longevity. It reflects an evolutionary advantage, likely selected for because it helped organisms survive periods of food scarcity. And importantly, many of these benefits seem to arise directly from that induced stress we talked about earlier. Fasting is considered a mild metabolic stressor.
Which sounds bad, but isn't necessarily.
Right, because it triggers these adaptive cellular responses that reduce oxidative damage and inflammation, with autophagy being a prime example. It highlights this principle, sometimes called hormesis, where periodic, mild challenges are actually crucial for maintaining and enhancing the robustness of the system.
Okay, so this incredible symphony of internal changes, from metabolic switches and hormonal shifts to cellular repair via autophagy, and the activation of these longevity pathways like sirtuins, what does it all actually mean for our health in practical terms?
Right, the payoff.
Let's talk about the potential benefits that have garnered so much attention. and probably top of mind for many people listening, is weight loss.
Indeed, and that's certainly one of the most widely recognized and studied potential benefits of intermittent fasting, including these 24-hour protocols, the potential to aid in weight loss and specifically fat reduction.
Does it work?
Well, studies consistently show that IF can lead to significant reductions in body weight and fat mass. Often the results are comparable to traditional continuous calorie restriction, and some evidence suggests IF might be better at preserving fat-free mass, muscle during weight loss.
Better than just cutting calories every day.
Potentially in some scenarios. Umbrella reviews, which look at lots of studies, found that various IF regimens, particularly alternate day fasting, ADF, led to significant weight loss and metabolic improvements compared to usual dieting approaches. Another big analysis, a network meta-analysis of almost 100 randomized clinical trials, confirmed that IF strategies did reduce body weight. And interestingly, it suggested ADF might have a slight edge, leading to about 1.3 kilograms greater weight loss compared to traditional calorie-restricted diets in shorter trials.
Okay, so evidence for weight loss seems pretty solid. What about metabolic health beyond just the number on the scale?
Good question. And yes, 24-hour fasting and IF more broadly has been linked to improvements in several key metabolic parameters. Things like reductions in blood pressure, lower fasting glucose levels, and improvements in cholesterol profiles, particularly lower triglycerides.
Which all contribute to lower risk of things like type 2 diabetes.
Exactly. These changes contribute to lowering the risk factors for metabolic diseases. Intermittent fasting has specifically been shown to improve blood sugar management, potentially by reducing insulin resistance. One study mentioned in the sources indicated that fasting, say, 3 days a week, could potentially reduce type 2 diabetes risk by increasing insulin sensitivity. That means your cells respond better to insulin, allowing glucose to get transported more efficiently from your bloodstream into the cells.
Okay, that sounds promising. But I sense a but coming. Is this picture always consistent?
Right. That's where, as you dig into the research, you find some nuances and conflicting findings. It's really important to acknowledge these. For instance, the sources mentioned a University of Sydney study. It found that while intermittent fasting did lead to weight loss, it didn't necessarily bring all the same beneficial health effects as other weight loss programs in their comparison.
Like what specifically?
Specifically, they noted a lack of significant improvement in insulin resistance markers and maybe less reduction in inflammation compared to what they expected or saw in other groups.
Huh. So weight loss happened, but maybe not all the other metabolic bells and whistles.
That's what this particular study suggested. And their conclusion was that perhaps some of the health claims around IF, especially regarding powerful anti-inflammatory responses or clinically significant improvements in insulin sensitivity, might have been, let's say, over-extrapolated from animal models and don't always translate perfectly or consistently to humans. It really highlights the importance of distinguishing between weight loss per se and specific independent metabolic improvements. They don't always go hand in hand perfectly with every dietary strategy.
That's a really crucial distinction, and definitely a reminder that the science is always evolving and we need to look at human studies carefully. Okay, let's move on to cardiovascular health. That's another huge area where fasting has garnered a lot of attention.
Yes, and again, there's evidence suggesting benefits. Fasting has been pretty consistently associated with improvements in several key cardiovascular risk factors.
Like cholesterol.
Exactly. Studies show it can help reduce levels of total cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, the so-called bad cholesterol, and triglycerides. Alternate day fasting in particular seems to show efficacy here.
And blood pressure.
Yes, reductions in both systolic and diastolic blood pressure have been reported in various IF studies. These improvements in lipid profiles and blood pressure, taken together, logically contribute to a lower overall risk profile for things like coronary artery disease and other cardiovascular issues. One specific study even found that levels of TMAO, that's trimethylamine N oxide, a compound linked to higher risk of coronary artery disease, significantly decreased after just a 24-hour fast. The implication being that regular fasting could potentially reduce CAD risk via this mechanism too.
Okay, so improvements in risk factors seem fairly well documented in some studies.
In some studies, yes. However, and this is a significant however, if we connect this to the bigger picture and look at longer-term outcomes in recent discussions, there is an ongoing scientific debate and some emerging concerns regarding the long-term effects of intermittent fasting on actual cardiovascular events or mortality.
Concerns, like what?
Well, some observational studies, and it's crucial to stress these are observational, showing association, not causation, have suggested that certain long-term intermittent fasting regimens, particularly very restrictive, time-restricted eating, TRE, with eating windows of less than 8 hours a day, might actually be associated with an increased risk of cardiovascular disease mortality.
Increased risk. Wow, that seems counterintuitive.
It does. For example, one preliminary analysis presented at a conference, not yet peer-reviewed, importantly suggested a potential 91% increased risk of CVD mortality among adults who reported adhering to an 8-hour TRE schedule compared to those with a more typical 12-16-hour eating window. This association seems stronger in people who already had heart conditions.
Okay, but observational, you said, so lots of caveats.
Huge caveats. These findings can only show correlations. They can be heavily influenced by confounding factors. Maybe the people choosing very short eating windows already had poorer health, or their overall diet quality was different, or the self-reported information wasn't accurate. We cannot conclude causality from this type of study alone.
Right. What do the more controlled trials say?
Well, conflicting evidence also comes from randomized clinical trials, RCTs. Many robust RCTs have shown that for short-term weight loss or improvements in cardiometabolic risk factors in people with obesity, IF protocols are often no more effective than standard, continuous, daily caloric restriction.
So the benefit might just be from eating fewer calories overall, not necessarily the fasting pattern itself.
That's what these RCTs suggest, that many of the observed short-term benefits might be primarily driven by the overall caloric deficit achieved, rather than some unique fasting-specific mechanism, at least for these particular outcomes. And other concerns raised in the scientific community include the potential for loss of lean muscle mass with some IF protocols, possible circadian rhythm misalignment if eating patterns become very irregular, and maybe even compromised food quality.
How so?
The idea of reward-based eating, feeling like you deserve less healthy foods during your eating window because you fasted, could potentially lead to less nutritionally balanced choices overall, and some studies have even noted potential increases in LDL cholesterol with certain IF patterns, possibly related to diet quality.
Okay, so the cardiovascular picture is complex. Short-term risk factor improvements seem possible, maybe linked to calorie reduction, but long-term effects and mechanisms are definitely still being debated and researched.
That sums it up well. It's an area needing much more rigorous long-term investigation.
This really highlights the importance, again, of looking at the full spectrum of evidence, the different study types, and not jumping to simple conclusions. Okay, beyond the weight and the heart health discussion, what about inflammation? That's another buzzword in health circles, and maybe brain function, too.
Yes, absolutely. Chronic inflammation is understood to be a significant contributor to a whole host of chronic conditions, from heart disease to diabetes to neurodegenerative diseases.
And fasting might help with that.
Some studies suggest it can. The sources mention a 2022 review that looked at 18 studies and found that intermittent fasting significantly reduced levels of C-reactive protein, or CRP, which is a key blood marker used to measure systemic inflammation.
Lower CRP is generally good, right?
Generally considered a positive sign, yes. Another small study combined IF with resistance training for a year and found this combination decreased inflammatory markers and reduced certain heart disease risk factors more than resistance training alone. Digging into the cellular level, a 24-hour fast has been shown to reduce the baseline expression of certain cytokines. These are signaling molecules involved in inflammation. This suggests IF could potentially be a useful strategy for reducing those low-grade peripheral inflammatory states often associated with things like obesity and chronic stress.
How does it work? Any specific mechanisms?
Research points towards IF potentially promoting insulin sensitivity, partly by inhibiting something called the NLRP3 inflammasome. This is a key protein complex involved in triggering inflammatory responses, and it's been linked to insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. So, by inhibiting this inflammasome, fasting might help break that cycle. Essentially, the evidence suggests fasting can help downregulate pro-inflammatory factors and potentially reverse some of the high expression of inflammatory markers seen in conditions like insulin resistance. So these anti-inflammatory effects likely contribute significantly to the metabolic benefits observed.
Okay, interesting link between inflammation and metabolism. What about the brain? You mentioned neuroprotection.
Right. Intermittent fasting is also believed to enhance brain function, promote neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to adapt and reorganize and potentially protect against cognitive decline through several biological mechanisms.
Like autophagy in the brain.
Exactly. We talked about how important autophagy is for neurons. By enhancing autophagy, IF helps clear out damaged cellular components and misfolded proteins within brain cells, which is thought to be particularly beneficial in preventing or slowing neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, where protein aggregation is a problem.
And the ketones we discussed earlier.
Yes, the ketones. During fasting, when ketone bodies become the brain's primary energy source instead of glucose, this seems to improve neuronal energy efficiency. Brain cells might run cleaner or more efficiently on ketones. This could enhance cognitive performance and make neurons more resistant to stress.
More resilient brain cells.
That's the idea. Plus, IF has been shown to significantly boost the production of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor.
BDF. That sounds important.
It's hugely important. BDNF is a protein that's vital for the survival of existing neurons, for promoting the growth of new neurons, neurogenesis, and for strengthening synapses, synaptic plasticity. All of these are critical for learning, memory, and overall cognitive function.
So fasting might actually help grow new brain cells.
Well, experimental studies, mainly in rodents so far, have demonstrated that intermittent fasting can increase neurogenesis, particularly in the hippocampus, a key brain region for memory. It also enhances long-term potentiation, which is a cellular mechanism underlying learning and memory. These findings support the potential for IF to be neuroprotective, possibly guarding against acute brain injuries like stroke, as well as chronic neurodegenerative diseases.
Okay, from potentially reducing inflammation to boosting brain health factors like BDNF and ketones, the ripple effects of fasting seem to extend pretty broadly.
They really do seem to touch many interconnected systems.
And of course, then there's the big one, the one everyone gets excited about, longevity.
Ah, yes, the quest for a longer, healthier life. And fasting's profound effects on these fundamental cellular processes naturally extend to potential impacts on longevity.
Autophagy again.
Autophagy is definitely a key player here. As we discussed, it's often considered an anti-aging process because it clears out that accumulated cellular junk dead cells, damaged components, making the body more efficient over time. This cellular cleansing and renewal is thought to contribute to enhanced cellular health and function, which is pretty fundamental to extending health span the years lived in good health.
Right, health span, not just lifespan.
Exactly. But beyond autophagy, periodic fasting has also been investigated for its impact on specific longevity genes.
Longevity genes. Tell me more.
Well, one study mentioned in the sources examined the effects of 10 days of periodic fasting on the expression of genes like FOXO3 and HTERT in young men who are overweight or obese.
Okay, what do those genes do?
FO3A is involved in the aging process. It helps regulate things like apoptosis, programmed cell death, and cell survival pathways. Variations in this gene have been linked to human longevity. HTERT is the gene for telomerase reverse transcriptase, the enzyme that helps maintain the length of telomeres.
Telomeres, the caps on our chromosomes.
Exactly. They shorten with age and cell division, and shorter telomeres are linked to cellular aging and age-related diseases. HTERT helps protect them.
And what did the fasting study find?
It found that this period of fasting significantly increased the expression of HTERT. The suggestion is that each regimen might become a potential strategy for, perhaps, preventing obesity-induced premature aging by favorably regulating the expression of some of these longevity-associated genes.
That's fascinating. Modulating gene expression through diet.
It is. And then, circling back, fasting also influences NAD plus metabolism and those sirtuins we discussed.
The currency in the accountants.
Right. And as we said, they are central to energy metabolism, DNA repair, and processes linked to healthy aging. Sirtuins, especially SIRT1 and SIRT3, get activated by fasting conditions and increased NAD plus availability. They play that crucial role in regulating cellular metabolic balance, stress response, and maybe even exhibiting anti-cancer effects.
Anti-cancer.
By shifting cellular metabolism towards a less proliferative or less rapidly dividing state, and by making cells generally less prone to oxidative stress and DNA damage, sirtuins might contribute to overall stress resistance and potentially reduce the risk of cancerous transformations. It's complex, but that's the hypothesis.
So fasting's ability to potentially increase NAD plus levels and activate sirtuins positions it as another potential intervention for promoting healthy aging.
That's the line of reasoning, yes. It all points towards fasting triggering these deeply embedded adaptive mechanisms that promote cellular resilience and may slow down some aspects of the aging process.
Wow. Okay, it really does sound like a truly remarkable set of potential benefits. From metabolic improvements and weight management, through cellular rejuvenation with autophagy, better inflammatory control, enhanced brain function, and maybe even impacting longevity pathways.
It covers a lot of ground.
But, and it's a big but, it is absolutely crucial that we balance all this potential upside with the other side of the coin, because no health strategy, no matter how promising it sounds, is universally beneficial or safe for everyone.
Absolutely critical point.
And our sources highlight some really important risks and side effects that you absolutely need to be aware of before even considering something like a 24-hour fast.
Right. So the natural question is, what are the immediate common experiences people might actually have when they try this, especially during that initial adaptation phase?
Yeah, what should people expect?
Well, fasting can definitely lead to a range of uncomfortable side effects, particularly when you're first starting out. The sources mention a study, I believe it was in a Saudi population, that reported several common symptoms within the first month of people adopting intermittent fasting.
Like what? Hunger, obviously.
Beyond hunger, yes. The most frequently occurring symptoms reported were headache. Over 61% of participants mentioned this, often attributed to low blood sugar, hypoglycemia, or maybe caffeine withdrawal if they cut coffee, usually described as diffuse non-pulsatile.
Okay, headache.
Lethargy was very common, experienced by 68% of participants, just feeling low energy, sluggish. Mood swings were noted by nearly 58%, and dizziness by almost 56%.
Mood swings and dizziness, that could impact daily life.
For sure. Polyuria, which is increased urination, occurred in about 46%. And low blood sugar itself, hypoglycemia, was reported by almost 29%.
So nearly a third felt symptoms of low blood sugar.
In that particular study group, yes. Other reported symptoms included things like palpitations, constipation, dehydration is a big risk if you're not careful, bloating, sometimes even fever or flu-like symptoms, the so-called keto flu some people experience when switching fuel sources.
Are these serious?
Generally, these side effects are considered mild to moderate. They typically don't require medical or surgical treatment, and they often fade after an adaptation period as your body gets used to the fasting schedule.
But they sound unpleasant.
They can definitely impact your daily performance and make it harder to stick with the fasting protocol, especially initially. Maintaining adequate hydration is absolutely crucial here. Drinking plenty of water or plain tea or black coffee during the fasting window can really help mitigate some of these negative effects like lightheadedness, headache, and fatigue.
Okay, so hydration is key to managing common side effects. But those are the common ones. Perhaps even more critical are the specific populations for whom fasting is simply not safe, or where, at the very least, extreme medical supervision is absolutely required.
This is vital. Cannot stress this enough. Intermittent fasting is not suitable for everyone, and certain individuals or groups should absolutely avoid it, or at the very minimum, consult a knowledgeable healthcare professional before even considering any form of fasting. These contraindications are critical to prevent potentially serious adverse health outcomes.
Okay, who absolutely should not be fasting?
Firstly, pregnant or breastfeeding women. This should be pretty obvious. Pregnancy means significantly increased energy needs for fetal development. Maternal intermittent fasting has been linked in some research to potential negative impacts on fetal growth, organ development, and potentially setting up long-term health issues for the offspring, things like predispositions to heart disease or type 2 diabetes later in life.
So definitely not during pregnancy. What about breastfeeding?
Similarly, not recommended. Breastfeeding women require an additional 350-500 calories per day just to produce milk. Fasting can potentially impact milk supply, energy levels. While very short fasts might not immediately tank supply, prolonged or frequent fasting can reduce milk quantity and maybe even its nutritional quality, potentially slowing the baby's weight gain. The strong advice is to wait until breastfeeding has completely ceased before considering IF for weight loss or other reasons.
Okay, pregnant and breastfeeding women definitely out. Who else?
Children, teenagers, and young adults basically under the age of 18. They require consistent caloric intake and a steady supply of nutrients for proper growth and development. Restricting food during these critical periods can easily lead to nutritional inadequacy and potentially hinder growth and development.
Makes sense. What about people with medical conditions? Diabetes.
Individuals with diabetes or any significant blood sugar regulation issues face substantial risks. Fasting can cause drastic and potentially dangerous swings in blood sugar levels, both highs and lows, hypoglycemia. This is particularly risky for people with type 1 diabetes who rely on insulin injections. The sources state there really haven't been studies on IF in this population, and the risk of severe, unsafe hypoglycemia is just too high.
So type 1 diabetes is a definite no-go. What about type 2?
Even for those with type 2 diabetes, especially if they're on certain medications like insulin or sulfonylureas that lower blood sugar, IF should generally be avoided or only undertaken under very strict, careful medical supervision with medication adjustments. The risks need to be carefully managed by a doctor.
Okay, diabetes is a major caution. What else?
Anyone with a history of eating disorders or disordered eating patterns. This is an absolute contraindication. Intermittent fasting, with its intentional restriction of food and potential focus on ignoring hunger signals, can be incredibly triggering for individuals with anorexia, bulimia, or binge eating disorder. It can easily reactivate harmful thoughts and behaviors.
Even if someone doesn't have a diagnosed eating disorder?
Yes. Experts warn that dieting in general and restrictive diets like IF can be included here is actually one of the most potent predictors of developing disordered eating behaviors in the first place. The restrictive nature can increase the likelihood of subsequent binge eating due to the body's primitive biological response to prolonged food deprivation. It can really foster an unhealthy, obsessive relationship with food.
That's a really important point about the psychological risks.
Crucial. Furthermore, people with significant pre-existing health conditions, serious heart disease, kidney disease, liver disease, should exercise extreme caution and absolutely consult their doctor before trying fasting. It could put extra strain on these organs.
What about low blood pressure?
Individuals who already have low blood pressure might find fasting problematic, as dehydration and lack of intake can lead to further decreases in blood pressure, increasing the risk of dizziness or fainting.
And medications.
Yes, if you're taking certain medications, fasting can potentially impact their absorption, metabolism, or effects. This is especially true for blood thinners, diuretics, blood pressure medications, and any drugs that affect blood sugar levels, like diabetes medications. Professional medical guidance is absolutely essential to manage these potential interactions safely.
Okay. Anyone else? Older adults.
Finally, yes, older adults, say over 65, are generally advised to avoid intermittent fasting or to proceed only with extreme caution and close medical supervision. There are potential risks like accelerated muscle loss, sarcopenia, reduced bone density, and an increased risk of falls associated with weakness or dizziness.
So quite a long list of people who need to be very careful or avoid it altogether.
It is. In summary, while intermittent fasting, including the 24-hour fast, can be a beneficial dietary approach for some healthy adults, it is definitely not universally safe or appropriate. A thorough consultation with a healthcare provider, a doctor, a registered dietitian knowledgeable about IF, is essential to assess your individual suitability, review your medical history, check your medications, and discuss the potential risks before you embark on any fasting regimen.
Absolutely. That personalized medical advice is key.
Yeah.
Well, what an incredibly detailed and really nuanced deep dive this has been. We've journeyed all the way from ancient temples and philosophical reasons for fasting, right down to the intricate dance of hormones and molecules and organelles within your own body.
It's quite the journey.
We've seen how a 24-hour fast isn't just passive waiting, but how it actively initiates this cascade of profound and interconnected physiological adaptations, shifting your body's energy metabolism, modulating those complex hormonal responses, activating crucial cellular repair processes like autophagy. We've covered the potential benefits that get people excited from weight management and improved cardiometabolic markers like cholesterol and blood sugar, to potentially enhance brain function through BDNF and ketones, and even those tantalizing insights into longevity pathways involving sirtuins and NAD plus taxane.
A lot of potential upsides discussed.
But, importantly, we've also squarely faced the complexities, the nuances, and the controversies, especially regarding those question marks around long-term cardiovascular health outcomes from observational studies and the sometimes conflicting findings about whether benefits in human studies are solely due to calorie restriction or if there's something unique to the fasting pattern itself. And, of course, the crucial differences between weight loss and other specific health benefits.
Right. And I think this deep dive truly underscores that the human body during a 24-hour fast is far from simply not eating. It's actively orchestrating this complex, highly coordinated internal symphony, really designed for survival, adaptation, and cellular resilience. It acts as that mild metabolic stressor we discussed that actually elicits a positive adaptive response in the right context.
But not a magic bullet.
Definitely not. And as we've clearly articulated, this is absolutely not a universal panacea. The potential harms, the risks for specific populations, pregnant women, children, those with eating disorders, certain medical conditions, these far outweigh any perceived benefits for those groups. Which really brings us to the crucial question for you, the listener, to consider. Given the incredibly personalized nature of our bodies, our health histories, our genetics, our lifestyles, what does this comprehensive understanding of 24-hour fasting actually mean for your individual approach to health and well-being?
Yeah, how do you apply this information personally?
Exactly. How do you balance these promising, sometimes exciting scientific findings with the critical need for individual medical consultation, a cautious, informed approach, and listening to your own body?
Indeed. That's the key takeaway, perhaps. And maybe the greatest insight from this deep dive isn't just what fasting does mechanistically, but how it reminds us of the incredible, almost unbelievable adaptive intelligence built into our own bodies. It's really a testament to our long evolutionary history, shaped by periods of feast and famine.
A resilience we often forget we have.
Exactly, and it challenges us to think, doesn't it? If this temporary deprivation, this controlled stress of not eating for a day, can activate such profound mechanisms of self-repair and resilience, what other mild stressors managed appropriately might we be able to leverage to unlock our innate adaptive capabilities for a healthier, more resilient future?